Hey guys, tonight we're heading straight into the frozen wilds. No fancy cabins, no cozy inns, and definitely no room service. Just you, the endless stretch of snow, and the kind of cold that creeps into your bones and sets up permanent residence. Imagine the hiss of wind threading through bare pine branches, the crunch of your boots on crusted snow, and that faint, eerie quiet that only the wilderness can hold. It's the 1820s and you've traded comfort for freedom, stepping into a landscape where survival is never guaranteed and warmth is a luxury earned one fire at a time. You probably won't survive this, at least, not without learning a few tricks from the mountain men who actually did. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing who's sharing the night with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you in the high Rockies isn't the view, it's the silence. You half expect birds or distant human sounds, but there's nothing. The air is too thin, the cold too sharp. You can see your breath hanging like smoke before it vanishes. This is the kind of cold that bites your eyelashes and stiffens the leather of your boots. You pull your fur collar higher and start walking, the snow squeaking beneath your soles. You're no tourist here, you're one of those wandering souls who came west with traps, rifles, and restless ambition. The mountain men of the early 19th century weren't just explorers. They were survivors, traders, and sometimes accidental philosophers. Most of them were young, many barely literate, and nearly all running from something: debts, war, boredom, or civilization itself. They came chasing beaver pelts, a kind of frontier gold rush that sent men into the wildest corners of the continent. The fur trade was booming, and every pelt could mean a meal, a drink, or a ticket back east. But for most, back east never happened. You picture one of them, maybe Jim Bridger, lean and weathered, eyes always scanning the horizon. Or Hugh Glass, the man who would later crawl across hundreds of miles after a grisly attack just to keep breathing. Historians still argue whether these men were heroes or just desperate souls who couldn't stand walls and rules. Whatever their motives, they learned to live where few others dared. The first rule: respect the mountain or the mountain buries you. By late autumn, the early snow starts falling. You know you need a shelter before the deep freeze sets in. There are no cozy taverns or villages, just rock faces, fallen timber, and your own hands. You study the landscape the way a sailor reads the sea. The ridges offer protection from wind, but they also hide avalanches waiting to drop. The trees promise cover, but the wolves like them too. You settle near a frozen creek, figuring you can chip through for water later, and start gathering what the wilderness grudgingly offers. Every gust of wind feels like a warning: move faster. The blizzards that sweep through these valleys can turn a quiet afternoon into a whiteout in minutes. Old mountain men used to say the wind had moods. It wasn't weather, it was a creature. You can almost believe it when the air starts to howl and the snow dances sideways like a curtain being torn apart. You hunker down, your breath shallow. It's strange to think that these men didn't just endure this, they preferred it. Away from towns, away from the crowded east, they felt free. You can almost feel that freedom yourself as you lift your eyes to the horizon, a rolling sea of white peaks catching the last gold of sunset. The world feels both infinite and intimate, like it's watching you back. Your gloves are stiff with frost now and your fingertips ache. You start thinking about shelter, how the mountain men built them, what worked and what didn't. But before that, you need a fire. It's funny how a single spark becomes a friend out here. You strike flint against steel, the tiny glow of life bursting against a backdrop of endless cold. The snow reflects it like a mirror, small warmth fighting infinite winter. Somewhere behind you, a lone coyote yips, a thin, high sound that echoes through the trees. You listen, realizing that everything in this wilderness listens too. That's something every mountain man understood. You're never truly alone out here, not really. The next morning, you wake to find your hair rimed with ice. Your breath has frozen on your coat in brittle lace. You stretch, your muscles stiff but alive, and glance at your surroundings. A rough lean-to of branches you threw together last night, barely enough to keep you from freezing solid. It's time to build something better. But first, you pause because there's something oddly peaceful about the silence, about being a speck of warmth in a world of frozen vastness. The wilderness doesn't care whether you make it or not, but it's beautiful in its indifference. The mountain men understood that. They didn't conquer nature, they bargained with it day by day, storm by storm. And that's where your story truly begins, standing in the snow, heart pounding, mind calm, ready to carve a life out of ice and wind. To the art of staying alive, discover how quick thinking and raw instinct meant the difference between warmth and a frozen tomb. You trudge through knee-deep snow, the sky a hard, pale gray, feeling every ounce of your body protesting. Cold seeps into your bones gnawing at them, but you press on. This is what mountain men called earning your existence. Survival here isn't glamorous, it's deliberate, exhausting, and mercilessly immediate. You discover quickly that instinct matters more than instruction manuals because the mountains offer no second chances. The first thing a mountain man learns is patience. You can't rush snowdrifts or frostbitten fingers. You set down your pack, shake the snow off, and survey the land. The trees, scraggly pines, maples bending under ice offer both danger and promise. A log might provide shelter, or it might be harboring a hungry predator. The frozen creek ahead seems harmless, but the ice could snap under a careless step. Historians still argue whether the mountain men relied more on learned skill or sheer luck. Maybe it was a precarious mix of both. You remember the tools strapped to your belt: hatchet, knife, flint striker, and a tiny saw. Every tool has a purpose, a story, a way to keep you alive. You start with the hatchet, hacking at dead branches for your lean-to. Each swing sends splinters flying and your muscles ache in protest, but there's a rhythm to it that feels oddly satisfying. It's the kind of labor that clears your mind almost as much as it clears the forest floor. Fires are your lifeline. You kneel on frozen ground. Gather a small pile of twigs and strike sparks. Smoke curls upward and the smell of burning pine fills your nose, reminding you of the cabins you once passed in far-off towns. Keeping fire alive is a ritual. Too small and it dies, too large and it wastes precious fuel. Mountain men often carried fatwood or resin-soaked pine chunks specifically for emergencies. You can almost imagine them whispering, "Guard the flame as you guard your life." Shelter comes next, and you begin crafting a snow wall against the wind. The powder is deeper than you expect, but you pack it down carefully, layer by layer. It's surprisingly sturdy. A mound of snow might look fragile, but compacted, it can resist howling blizzards. You press your hands into the wall, feeling the cold bite, and consider the ingenuity required for survival. Quirky as it sounds, some men even used old barrels or discarded wagon wheels as reinforcement. Necessity breeds creativity, or perhaps desperation. You pause for a moment and listen. The forest is alive with sound if you tune in properly. Crows caw distantly, snow slides silently from branches, and a squirrel, surprisingly bold, scampers across your snowbank. Isolation is tricky. You crave silence but also crave companionship. Mountain men often traveled in pairs or small groups, partly to share the burden, partly to ward off madness. Solitude in the wilderness is a double-edged sword, restorative yet dangerously reflective. Your meal today is simple: dried venison jerky wrapped in a layer of fat carried from last week's hunt. Even food storage is an art form. Cold preserves, but ice can crush or contaminate. You nibble cautiously, savoring each bite, aware that calories are precious currency here. Hunters sometimes used a quirky trick, storing meat under snow and marking it with a stick carved like a small statue so they wouldn't forget their hidden cache. You chuckle at the thought. It's as much artistry as practicality. Weather patterns are unpredictable. Clouds darken and swirl, a light flurry begins. You realize how crucial timing is. Mountain men watch the sky like hawks, noting subtle shifts in wind, cloud color, and snow texture. These signs determined whether you could hunt, build, or hunker down. A misread signal could mean frostbite or worse. Every step forward requires calculation. Where to place your next log, which way to orient your lean-to, how to store firewood to avoid dampness. Historians still argue whether intuition or experience mattered more. The truth is probably both, but leaning too heavily on either could be fatal. You find a slightly elevated mound protected from the worst wind and decide it's your base for the next few hours. As you settle, you glance at the horizon and notice a shimmer across the snow, a mirage, or maybe a sign of distant frozen streams. Mountain men often interpreted such signs as messages from the land itself. Maybe it's superstition, maybe it's careful observation honed over decades. Either way, it makes you pause, humbled by the mountain's quiet authority. You hunker down, brushing snow from your coat, and feel a sense of accomplishment. Survival is small victories strung together, each one crucial. You wrap your fur tighter, sip from a canteen of semi-frozen water, and allow yourself a brief rest. Tomorrow you'll need to hunt, fortify your shelter, and ensure your fire survives another night. Tonight you rest because in the mountains, sleep is as precious as warmth. 3 snow caves and wind walls. You dig, carve, and shape the snow itself into a life-saving cocoon against howling blizzards. The wind picks up, a low moan that slides through the trees and rattles your makeshift shelter. You press your back against the snow wall, feeling its surprising solidity. It's not much, but it's enough to keep the worst of the blizzard at bay. You start digging, your hands stiff but determined, carving out a small snow cave, the kind mountain men called a quinzee. Layer by layer, you pack the snow, listening to the eerie crunch beneath your palms. The walls glint faintly under the dim light, a crystalline fortress born from cold and necessity. You slide inside, and it's startling how quickly the temperature inside stabilizes. Snow, for all its bite outside, becomes a surprisingly good insulator. Mountain men knew this instinctively, though they often debated the best design: dome-shaped, tunnel-style, or partially open. Historians still argue whether the tunnel entry was more effective than a simple domed cavity. but either way you notice the difference immediately. The storm outside roars, but you're shielded, tucked into a hollow of warmth that feels almost like magic. Fire is tricky here though. A roaring flame can melt your walls and flood your shelter with water, so you resort to a small candle, shielded carefully, and it provides just enough glow to see. Some mountain men use metal tins or hollowed logs as a kind of portable hearth, a fringe technique many laughed at until it saved a life during an unexpected whiteout. You poke at the candle's flame, mesmerized by how tiny sparks seem so heroic against a backdrop of infinite white. You start arranging your bedding, furs, pine boughs, and an old blanket you've carried for weeks. Layering is essential. Insulation isn't just about blocking cold, it's about trapping heat from your own body. You wrap yourself, feeling the prickly fur against your cheek, and realize how ingenious these designs are. A quinsy isn't just a cave, it's a breathing, living space that mirrors your body's needs. Hunger reminds you that shelter alone isn't enough. You reach for dried meat and a handful of nuts, savoring them slowly. Preserving food in freezing conditions is a subtle science. Too exposed and moisture creeps in, too buried and it becomes inaccessible. Some mountain men even carved shallow pits in the snow, lining them with bark to store small game. Quirky as it sounds, it worked. You nibble, thinking about how necessity breeds creativity, and you're grateful for the centuries of trial and error that led to these solutions. Time seems to stretch inside the cave. The storm rages outside, but inside every movement is deliberate, almost ritualistic. You notice condensation forming and gently scrape it away, aware that unchecked moisture leads to cold. Every survival decision is calculated. How far to push your body, when to eat, where to place your gear. Even sleep is measured. Mountain men often took short, light naps, always ready to respond to danger. You can't help but think about history, how these shelters saved lives yet were often overlooked. Journals speak of men who survived weeks in blizzards, their quinzes keeping frost at bay while storms ravaged the valleys. Historians still argue whether these accounts were romanticized, but the science of snow insulation backs up the practicality. You press your palm against the wall and feel it, solid. Cold protective. Outside, the wind shrieks. Snow pounds against your entrance, forming a small drift that partially seals it. You dig just enough to maintain access, marveling at how adaptable the design is. Each day in the wilderness teaches you something new. Mountain men refine these techniques through bitter trial, experimenting with tunnel shapes, ventilation holes, and layered bedding. Some even added small caches inside the cave for food or tools, a tiny winter pantry. As night falls, the outside world becomes a blur of white noise. You lie back, listening to the storm's rhythm and feel the isolation pressing close. But paradoxically, the snow cave gives you a sense of intimacy with the wilderness. You're not fighting it outright, you're negotiating a truce. Every snow-packed wall, every insulated corner is a compromise that lets you live another day. By morning, you'll emerge into a world sculpted by frost, but tonight, your quinsy is more than shelter. It's a testament to ingenuity, patience, and the quiet heroism of survival. The wind still roars, but you are warm, alive, and ready to continue the delicate dance with nature that defines life in the high mountains. 4 cabins from nothing watch as rough-hewn logs and frozen mud become a frontier fortress, your winter home in the wilderness. You rise to the muffled world of dawn, the snow cave dimly lit by a thin gray light filtering through its ceiling. The storm has eased slightly, but the mountains are still wrapped in frozen silence. You stretch carefully, muscles aching from yesterday's digging and hauling, and step outside. The air is biting, each inhalation a sharp shock, but the sky is clearer now and you can finally survey your surroundings. Today you'll build something more permanent, a log cabin that can withstand the brutal cold and keep you alive through the worst of winter. Cabin building isn't just hammer and nails here, it's an art form honed by necessity. You pick through fallen trees, selecting straight pines and sturdy firs, testing each one for rot or weakness. Some mountain men even carried saws made for cross-cutting frozen logs, while others relied on axes alone. It's slow work. Every log you lift and position demands careful thought, weight, balance, insulation, and wind direction. Historians still argue whether it was better to use horizontal logs with interlocking corners or vertical planks packed with moss, but each technique had its champions. You settle on horizontal logs, stacking them with meticulous precision. You start with a simple frame, interlocking logs at the corners like puzzle pieces. The process is physically grueling. Each log is heavy, slick with frost, and awkward. But as the structure takes shape, you feel a strange sense of satisfaction. This is more than a shelter, it's a fortress carved from the wilderness. You pause occasionally, hammering small wooden pegs to secure logs or stuffing moss between them for insulation. Even tiny gaps can turn into a frostbite hazard if ignored. Fireplace construction is next. You hollow out a small stone hearth, careful to prevent smoke from choking your shelter. A clever mountain man might line the chimney with clay or mud, improving airflow. Some even added a metal plate to reflect heat inward. Quirky as it seems, these tweaks mattered. They could mean the difference between a tolerable night and frozen misery. You arrange stones and strike flint to test your small flame. Sparks ignite tinder, and warmth begins to seep through the logs, filling the cabin with a sense of quiet triumph. You hang furs along the walls, layering hides over each other for insulation. Animal pelts aren't just practical, they're markers of skill and survival. Each bear, deer, or beaver hide tells a story of hunting prowess and luck in the wilderness. You wrap one around your shoulders and feel the comforting weight, the texture soft against frozen skin. Historians still argue whether layering furs was more effective than simply piling snow around cabins, but the consensus seems to lean toward the combination approach. Meal preparation demands attention. You carve small notches in logs to hold drying racks, placing jerky and nuts just above the fireplace to keep them from freezing solid. Some mountain men use smoke to preserve meat, an artful technique that gave a subtle flavor while warding off spoilage. You nibble on a strip of venison, noting how simple, calorically dense meals are the backbone of winter survival. Outside, snowdrifts begin to pile against your new walls. You step back and observe your handiwork, a modest cabin yet resilient, a testament to planning and grit. You can imagine mountain men gathering inside such shelters, sharing stories by the fire and debating the merits of different cabin styles. Quirky anecdotes abound. Some preferred roofs so steep snow slid off naturally, while others built lower, dome-like ceilings to trap heat. Every decision carries consequence. You hammer a few pegs tighter, ensuring corners won't shift under weight, and feel a twinge of pride. The wilderness doesn't hand out praise, but survival itself is acknowledgement enough. Each log, each layer of moss, each carefully chosen stone for the hearth is a small victory in a place where victories are scarce. Night falls and the cabin glows faintly from the fireplace. The wind rattles the walls, but the structure stands firm. You curl up under a pile of furs, listening to the wilderness breathing outside, realizing that a cabin isn't just wood and moss. It's a symbol of resilience, of human ingenuity, and of the delicate balance between endurance and surrender. Tomorrow you'll refine it, perhaps expand it or fortify it against deeper snow, but tonight you rest, warmed by fire, furs, and accomplishment. 5 Fire in the Frost. Explore how mountain men kept fire alive in sub-zero storms, guarding sparks like sacred treasure. The morning air is crisp but merciless, each breath sharp as it slices through your lungs. You step outside your cabin, boots crunching over frost-hardened snow, and scan the horizon. Clouds roll low over the peaks, carrying whispers of another blizzard that might hit by evening. You tighten your fur-lined hood, feeling the cold creep along the edges of your vision, and focus on the next essential task: fire. Fire is life in the mountains. Without it, warmth, cooking, and even morale vanish. You kneel beside a small stack of kindling, carefully layering twigs, pine needles, and resin-soaked fatwood. The friction of flint against steel sparks a tiny ember which you nurture with patience and care. It's a slow process, one that demands focus and respect. Quirky as it seems, some mountain men carried small bundles of dried fungus, prized for its astonishing ability to catch even the faintest spark. You strike and strike until the tiniest wisp of smoke curls, a fragile herald of heat. Once the flame catches, you feed it cautiously. Mindful of your snow-packed cabin walls. Too aggressive and the fire melts insulation, too timid and the cold creeps back. Mountain men often developed intricate hearth systems, using metal plates or small chimneys to maximize heat while minimizing smoke. Historians still argue whether open flames or controlled stove-like setups were more efficient, but either way, mastery of fire was non-negotiable for survival. You tend the blaze, feeling warmth gradually radiate through your frozen fingers. The smell of burning pine fills your nose, rich and almost intoxicating. Outside, a fine drizzle of snow begins to fall again, frosting the landscape, but inside you are cocooned, comforted by the crackle and pop of your tiny hearth. You pause and reflect on how dependent you become on this simple element. A spark can sustain life, its absence can end it. Next, you prepare food near the flame. Jerky, nuts, and dried roots are carefully placed on heated stones to thaw without burning. Some mountain men carried small copper pots which they could hang near the fire for warming water or soups. You sip from a tin of warmed water, feeling it seep into your chilled core. Even modest warmth transforms perception. What seemed unbearable moments ago now feels manageable. You also experiment with small smoke signals. A thin wisp through the chimney can alert companions miles away, a technique often employed in emergency situations. Quirky, yes, but effective. Mountain men were improvisers, always adapting. You poke at the embers, noting the smell, the crackle, and the gentle orange glow that seems to push back the harsh white of the world outside. The wind rattles the cabin, and you notice subtle details. A draft near the roofline, frost building on certain logs, sparks reflecting oddly off ice-encrusted surfaces. Fire management isn't just about warmth, it's an ongoing negotiation with environment and materials. Mistakes could mean smoke-filled rooms, melted walls, or even the loss of a critical meal. You adjust the hearth, placing stones to redirect heat and capture the maximum energy from a modest flame. As the day stretches, you add a few logs to the fire, watching their amber glow spread through the cabin. There's a rhythm to it, almost meditative. Mountain men often spoke of listening to the fire, sensing when it needed feeding or when it indicated impending weather changes. It's part science, part superstition, but you notice a subtle truth in it: observation is survival. By evening, the storm outside intensifies, but inside the cabin is alive with gentle heat. You lean back against a fur-draped wall, sipping a bit of warm broth and feel a rare contentment. Fire has done more than provide warmth. It has created a sense of security, a fragile bubble of life in the indifferent mountains. Night deepens, snow continues to fall, and you tuck yourself closer to the hearth. You marvel at the ingenuity of mountain men who mastered flame as both tool and companion. In this harsh wilderness, fire isn't luxury, it's friendship, sustenance, and survival all in one. You drift toward sleep, listening to the crackle, knowing tomorrow will demand skill, patience, and vigilance again, but tonight warmth conquers cold. 6. Tools of the frozen trade. From axes to awls, every tool you carry becomes a key to survival when the mountains turn cruel. You wake to the subtle creak of your cabin settling under the weight of fresh snow. The wind has softened to a low moan, but the world outside remains an unbroken expanse of white. Today, your focus turns to tools, the instruments that transform raw wilderness into livable space. Without them, your fire, your cabin, and even your Quincy are just fragile illusions, easily undone by frost, wind, or exhaustion. You strap on your belt, checking each implement: hatchet, awl, small saw, and a knife honed to a razor's edge. Everyone is essential, and you realize quickly that survival is as much about precision as endurance. Axes are the backbone of mountain living. You swing carefully at a fallen pine, knotting the resistance of frozen wood. Each strike reverberates through your shoulders, and yet you welcome the sensation. It's work that keeps the mind sharp, muscles warm, and spirits engaged. Mountain men develop specialized axes for different tasks, light ones for carving and heavy ones for splitting logs. You experiment with both, marveling at how design can so directly influence efficiency. Historians still argue whether the standard double-bit axe or a single-blade version was superior, but you find yourself favoring the simplicity of a well-balanced single blade. Knives and awls are equally vital. You use your knife to whittle steaks for a temporary lean-to outside, while the awl helps punch precise holes in leather straps used to lash logs or secure furs. Quirky as it might sound, some mountain men even carried multi-purpose tools resembling modern Swiss Army knives, though often improvised from salvaged metal. Every edge, point, and curve has a story of survival embedded in it. You feel a peculiar kinship with those long-ago hands that held similar implements in storms, snow, and silence. You step back, surveying the day's work, then shift attention to maintenance. Tools in these conditions are vulnerable. Ice can crack handles, metal can rust despite cold, and constant use dulls edges. You sharpen your knife carefully, scrape resin from your hatchet, and oil the joints of your saw. This isn't just practicality, it's ritual. Mountain men understood that tool care wasn't a chore but a form of respect for the wilderness, for oneself, and for the line between life and death. Outside, a light snow begins to fall again, frosting logs and footprints alike. You prepare stakes and small boards, reinforcing your cabin's perimeter. Even minor reinforcements matter. Wind can pry open loose logs, frost can weaken a roof, and snow accumulation can collapse walls. Some mountain men used ingenious techniques, like wedging smaller branches between logs or layering moss for added stability. You mimic these tactics, marveling at their ingenuity. Meal prep becomes an exercise in creativity. You set a small pan near the hearth, using heated stones to thaw frozen water and warm jerky without igniting the furs. Mountain men often improvised with whatever they had: hollowed logs, flat stones, even discarded tin containers. Quirky survival hacks abound, and they work because they respect the environment's limitations rather than challenging them. You sip a thin broth, nodding the subtle sweetness from frozen roots, simple, sustaining, and surprisingly comforting. You glance over your tools and notice something extraordinary. Every dent, nick, and mark tells a story. These are not just objects, they are extensions of skill, memory, and experience. The hatchet that split yesterday's logs, the knife that carved steaks, the awl that secured furs, they are silent companions as vital as any human partner. Historians still argue whether survival was more about physical endurance or mental acuity, but clearly, mastery of tools straddles both realms. As evening approaches, you arrange your implements neatly, each in its designated place. Preparedness is a quiet triumph, a subtle defiance against the harsh, indifferent wilderness. You settle back near the hearth, furs wrapped tightly, and let your mind wander through the quiet accomplishments of the day. The fire glows softly, casting long shadows over logs and tools alike. a testament to human ingenuity and careful planning. Outside, snowflakes drift lazily and the wind hums through the peaks. Inside, you feel the small, profound victory of a well-prepared camp. Tools sharpened, logs secured, fire managed, you've carved another day from the relentless wilderness. Mountain men in their unpredictable, unforgiving world would nod in approval. You allow yourself to rest, knowing that tomorrow will bring challenges, but tonight, skill and preparation have brought a measure of peace. 7. Furs, hides, and layered luck. Learn how animal skins became both insulation and identity in a world where frost bites deep. You awake to a world glazed in frost, the cabin breathing slowly under the weight of snow. The air is bitter but alive, each inhalation reminding you of the delicate line between endurance and surrender. Today you turn your attention to furs, hides, and layered insulation, the very armor that stands between you and winter's relentless teeth. You unwrap a thick deer hide, feeling the supple warmth beneath your fingers. It's not just clothing, it's survival, artistry, and identity intertwined. Mountain men were meticulous about their layers. Each garment had a purpose. Base layers trapped sweat, mid-layers insulated, and outer layers blocked wind and moisture. You layer a wool tunic beneath a fur-lined coat, wrapping yourself in the warmth accumulated through careful preparation. Historians still argue whether layered furs or single heavy pelts offered superior protection, but experience proves that layering offers flexibility and resilience. Even the quirkiest combinations, rabbit pelts under bear hides, have their advocates, tested over countless winters. You step outside to inspect your makeshift drying rack, where furs from yesterday's hunt hang carefully. Preservation is key. Moisture, frost, and even tiny insects can ruin valuable insulation. You brush off snow and rotate the pelts, admiring the subtle variety of textures. Some mountain men use pine boughs between layers to improve airflow, a technique both clever and fragrant, filling the cabin with the scent of evergreen. You follow suit, feeling a minor, almost whimsical satisfaction in these small refinements. Your gloves, stuffed with fur, guard against frostbite as you prepare additional hides for bedding and outerwear. Animal pelts weren't just functional, they were markers of skill. A well-prepared coat signaled hunting success, understanding of terrain, and respect for the animals taken. Some mountain men even traded hides as currency, negotiating warmth for goods in the rare rendezvous or trading post. Quirky as it may seem, a carefully chosen and treated pelt could mean the difference between life and death. Mealtime requires similar ingenuity. You thaw dried meat by the fire, layering it carefully to avoid overcooking. Certain mountain men experimented with wrapping jerky in thin furs, allowing gradual warming and protection against freezing. You chew thoughtfully, savoring calories that feel like treasure, and consider how every decision in the wilderness carries consequences. One mistake, a missed frostbite warning, a torn layer, a neglected fire, can cascade into catastrophe. You adjust your sleeping area, adding layers of fur beneath and over you. Ventilation matters. Condensation from your breath can drip and freeze if unchecked. Some men even created tiny snow trenches around their bedding to direct moisture away, a quirky but effective technique. You try it, noting how such small innovations enhance comfort in a world otherwise defined by discomfort. You pause to observe your reflection in a thin sheet of ice along the creek. Frost etches your eyelashes and cheeks are tinged red, but your eyes burn with quiet determination. Mountain men were admired not just for toughness but for attentiveness. Their survival hinged on noticing subtleties others overlooked. The exact placement of fur, the sequence of layers, even the way a coat hangs can mean enduring or succumbing to winter's bite. By late afternoon, you feel the cumulative comfort of your layered defenses. Your fingers are flexible, your core warm, and your spirit buoyed by preparation. Outside, wind gusts rattle trees and snow swirls in hypnotic patterns, but inside, layers of hide, fur, and ingenuity form a cocoon of life. You sip from your warmed water canteen, feeling the ritualistic rhythm of tending to yourself and your gear. As night falls, the cabin glows faintly from embers. You wrap yourself tighter, reflecting on the artistry embedded in mountain survival. Clothing, bedding, and layered insulation are as much cultural expression as practical necessity. Some mountain men even decorated hides with carved patterns or dyed them subtly, blending function with identity. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was, but the traces in journals and surviving artifacts hint at a world where survival and self-expression coexist. You settle into your bed of furs, the cabin and your carefully layered garments working in harmony to keep the wilderness at bay. Outside, snow drifts pile softly against the walls, the winds howl a lullaby rather than a threat. Tonight, you sleep wrapped in ingenuity, warmth, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that layered luck, skill, observation, and patience has made life in the frozen mountains possible. 8. The food that didn't freeze. You find out how hunters trapped, dried, and stored their meals when every stream and root lay locked in ice. You wake to pale, brittle light filtering through frost-coated windows, the world outside an endless canvas of white. Hunger tugs at your stomach, a reminder that shelter and warmth are only half the battle. Today you focus on the food that doesn't freeze, the meals that can sustain you when streams are solid and roots and berries are locked under snow. The mountain men were masters of improvisation, devising methods to trap, dry, and store food in a climate that seems designed to strip life away. You unpack your small toolkit of hunting essentials: traps, snares, and a lightweight rifle. Every item has a specific purpose, each the result of decades of experimentation. Small snares can capture rabbits or squirrels, providing quick calories, while larger traps might bring down a fox or even a deer. Historians still argue whether mountain men relied more on active hunting or passive trapping, but clearly both strategies were employed with care. You set your snares along well-worn animal trails, anchoring them to sturdy trees, and cover them lightly with snow to conceal their presence. Drying and preserving food is equally crucial. You hang jerky strips and smoked meat near your fire, ensuring gentle heat to remove moisture without freezing the surface. Some mountain men use small smokehouses built from rocks and branches, creating controlled environments where meat and fish could last months. Quirky techniques included storing dried goods in hollow logs or beneath snow drifts, marked subtly with carved sticks. You follow these principles, feeling the quiet thrill of creating a tiny pantry amidst the frozen vastness. Roots and tubers from earlier foraging trips are thawed carefully, wrapped in cloths to prevent ice crystals from forming. You boil a small mixture in a tin pot over hot stones, noting how the flavors, earthy, simple, sustaining, remind you of the ingenuity of human survival. Even the smallest calories count. Every morsel is a tactical advantage. You sip slowly, savoring both warmth and sustenance, mindful that winter demands both patience and strategy. Snow and ice present unique challenges. Streams and ponds are locked solid, so water must be thawed before cooking or drinking. You chip carefully at a frozen creek, collecting shards into a pot and heating them over embers. Mountain men often added tiny rocks to keep the water from cooling too quickly and prevent it from refreezing. Quirky tricks like these underscore the adaptive genius required to live comfortably, or at least safely, in such an extreme environment. You also store extra food for emergencies, carving small compartments within snow walls or beneath logs to keep caches hidden and insulated. Each container is carefully labeled with subtle marks so you can relocate it after days of heavy snow. Historians still debate whether these techniques were universally applied or relied on individual creativity, but the logic is undeniable. Careful storage multiplies survival odds. As the day progresses, you maintain vigilance over your traps and food stores. The landscape seems serene, but danger lurks in subtle forms. Ice weakens, snowdrifts shift, and predators roam silently. Mountain men developed an acute sense of observation, learning to read animal tracks, weather patterns, and even the placement of snowflakes for clues about food availability and hazard. You follow suit, eyes scanning the sparkling ground and listening for the faintest rustle. By late afternoon, your modest harvest grows into a small stockpile. Dried meat, trapped game, roots, and nuts, all carefully layered for protection against frost. You feel a quiet satisfaction knowing that preparation today ensures survival tomorrow. Outside, the wind whips against your cabin walls and the snow swirls in hypnotic, endless patterns, but inside, your careful work provides comfort, safety, and sustenance. As night falls, you arrange your provisions near the hearth, ensuring easy access and protection from both cold and opportunistic wildlife. The glow of fire reflects off your carefully stored food, a testament to planning and ingenuity. You settle under furs, knowing that tomorrow will demand hunting, tending traps, and careful attention to the delicate balance of supply and consumption. In these mountains, survival is as much about foresight as it is about courage. 9. Shelters in motion. See how snowshoes, sleds, and lean-tos turn the wilderness into a nomad's playground of ice and wood. Dawn breaks quietly, filtering through frost-laced windows and illuminating a world sculpted by ice and wind. Today, you focus on shelters in motion. The mobile, adaptable spaces that allow survival in shifting snowfields and unpredictable terrain. Snowshoes, sleds, and temporary lean-tos are your allies, enabling you to navigate frozen valleys while carrying essential gear and food supplies. Mountain men mastered these strategies, turning winter travel into a dance with the wilderness itself. You strap on snowshoes, their wooden frames and rawhide bindings creaking under your weight. Walking feels odd at first, deliberate, exaggerated steps, but soon you adjust, learning to glide across the snow without sinking. Snowshoes redistribute your weight, keeping you above crusted layers that could otherwise swallow your feet. Historians still argue whether mountain men preferred wider bare paw styles or narrower, longer frames, but both designs allowed survival in deep drifts. You favor a hybrid approach, balancing stability with speed. Sleds are equally indispensable. You load a small sled with furs, dried meat, and firewood, tying each bundle securely. The sled isn't just transport, it's an extension of your camp, a movable cache that lets you carry months of preparation through rugged terrain. Quirky techniques included lining sleds with animal hides to prevent freezing, or using carved wooden runners to navigate over ice. You test the sled on a gentle slope, marveling at how smoothly it slides and how much effort it saves. Temporary lean-tos supplement fixed cabins. You select a small ridge protected from wind and construct a low shelter using fallen branches and snow. These are not luxurious structures, just enough to shield you during blizzards to provide rest or to store gear. Mountain men often improvised, using everything from discarded bark to moss padding to reinforce walls. Historians still argue whether temporary shelters were seen as less honorable than permanent cabins, but practicality often outweighed pride. Travel requires careful planning. You plot a route along ridges, avoiding avalanche-prone slopes and thin ice. Observing animal tracks and subtle terrain cues, you move cautiously yet efficiently. Some mountain men favored following ridgelines for visibility and wind protection, while others preferred valley travel for concealment and access to water. You adjust your pace, mindful of both energy expenditure and environmental hazards. Carrying food on the move demands strategy. You distribute supplies across sled and pack to maintain balance and prevent freezing. Small caches are sometimes buried along the route for emergency access. Quirky as it may sound, some men even marked hidden caches with natural indicators, bent branches, stacked stones, or carved notches, ensuring they could relocate provisions after heavy snow. You check each cache as you progress, practicing both patience and foresight. As you glide across the frozen landscape, the solitude becomes almost meditative. Snow squeaks beneath your feet, wind whispers through distant pines, and your breath forms small clouds that vanish immediately. Survival is a constant negotiation, maintaining warmth, conserving energy, and staying alert to threats. Mountain men perfected these rhythms, moving fluidly between mobility and shelter, between effort and rest. By mid-afternoon, you reach a ridge overlooking a frozen valley. You pause, sled resting beside you, snowshoes dusted with fresh powder, and admire the panorama. Winter travel isn't merely functional, it's a communion with the landscape. You sense both vulnerability and mastery, the delicate balance that defines mountain survival. As evening falls, you construct a small lean-to at a sheltered location, placing furs and firewood inside. Tonight, the cabin will remain a permanent refuge while you sleep in a temporary haven closer to the heart of the mountains. You hunker down, the wind howling outside, and marvel at the ingenuity of mobile shelters, sleds, and snowshoes. These tools extend your reach, giving you freedom without sacrificing safety. In this vast, frozen expanse, movement itself becomes a form of survival artistry. 10. Blizzard companionship. You discover how men survived not just the cold, but the silence, how stories, songs, and solitude shaped their sanity. The sun barely rises above the jagged peaks, casting long, pale shadows across the frozen landscape. You feel the isolation immediately. The mountains stretch endlessly in every direction, vast and indifferent. Today you confront not just the cold or hunger, but the quieter, more insidious challenge of blizzard companionship, the solitude and mental endurance required to survive when the world contracts to the size of your shelter. Mountain men quickly realized that enduring winter wasn't just physical, it was profoundly psychological. Inside your cabin, you wrap yourself in layered furs and breathe deeply. Silence can be both comforting and threatening. You hear only the wind, the occasional creak of logs, and your own heartbeat. Quirky as it may seem, some mountain men carried small talismans or personal mementos, bits of string, carved wooden animals, or coins, to remind themselves of home and anchor their minds. Historians still argue whether these tokens were mere superstition or essential psychological tools, but their presence in journals suggests they mattered more than we often assume. Storytelling becomes a lifeline. You imagine the voices of fellow mountain men, spinning tales around a crackling fire, recounting hunting adventures, close calls with predators, and occasionally exaggerated exploits of heroism. Solitude in the wilderness magnifies memory and imagination. Each tale carries weight, teaching caution, pride, or practical skill. You murmur your own improvised stories aloud, observing how sound fills the cabin and combats the oppressive quiet outside. Practical companionship emerges in creative ways. You check traps, stir fires, and rotate bedding, each small task a ritual that structures the day. Mountain men often develop strict routines to maintain mental clarity. Meals, fire maintenance, tool sharpening, and observation were scheduled almost religiously. Quirky though it may seem, this rhythm kept panic, despair, or recklessness at bay. You follow suit, moving deliberately, savoring each small act of care. Hunting requires focus, even when alone. You dress carefully, layering furs for warmth and mobility, and check snares set along animal trails. The thrill of capture is tempered by constant awareness of environmental hazards, icy surfaces, hidden crevasses, and predator tracks. You move silently, observing subtle cues in the snow and trees, feeling a deep connection to both prey and the land itself. Historians still argue whether mountain men thrived more on instinct or learned skill, but the interplay is undeniable. Survival relied on both attention and intuition. Nighttime brings its own challenges. You sit near the fire, reflecting on the day, listening to the wind, and tracing constellations through a small window. Silence becomes a companion and you cultivate a sense of presence rather than anxiety. Quirky methods, singing softly, whittling small objects, or even talking to the fire, were common among mountain men, reinforcing alertness while warding off loneliness. As the storm rages outside, you notice the snow drifting gently against your cabin walls. The fire's warmth is a small miracle, the glow illuminating carefully stored supplies, furs, and tools, a sanctuary in the white wilderness. You feel the subtle triumph of endurance, physical preparation, keen observation, and quiet rituals have preserved your body and mind. In these moments, survival transcends mere technique. Companionship, even when solitary, is cultivated through structure, imagination, and attentiveness. You lean back, wrapped in furs, firelight dancing on the walls, and understand the mountain men's paradox. The wilderness isolates yet demands presence, solitude yet requires mental community. Tonight, in this delicate balance, you are alive, alert, and strangely comforted. 11. Trading posts and winter rendezvous. Follow the trails to the few places of warmth and whiskey, where mountain men shared survival secrets and tall tales. Morning comes slowly, filtered through frost-laden windows, and you feel the subtle weight of the night's cold still lingering in your bones. Today you focus on hunting strategies in deep winter, the careful observation, timing, and patience required to secure food when the landscape is buried under snow and ice. Mountain men were nothing if not patient, learning to read animal behavior, track footprints, and anticipate movement across frozen terrain. You lace up your snowshoes and step lightly over crusted snow, glancing at the horizon where pines punctuate white ridges. Tracks of deer, rabbits, and smaller animals guide your route. Each track is a puzzle telling a story of direction, speed, and even health. Quirky though it may seem, some mountain men carried small notebooks, sketching tracks and noting conditions to refine their hunting over days or weeks. Historians still debate how systematically these notes were kept, but the attention to detail was crucial. Setting up snares and traps is an exercise in subtlety. You hide the wire loops beneath a dusting of snow, anchor stakes carefully, and place bait thoughtfully. One misstep, a branch in the wrong place, or a poorly covered loop could ruin hours of labor. You pause occasionally to adjust traps, listening to the wind and the subtle sounds of forest life. Predators are always present, wolves and coyotes that might steal your catch, reminding you that survival requires both patience and vigilance. The rifle is your backup. You load carefully, mindful that cold metal affects both function and aim. Mountain men often carried rifles suited for short-range precision, paired with ammunition that had been stored in moisture-proof containers. Quirky methods included using cloth to keep powder dry or wrapping bullets in greased paper. Each step is deliberate, each check a small ritual. You scan distant ridges, knowing that missed opportunities could mean hunger tomorrow. After securing a few small catches, you prepare them over a carefully maintained fire. Heat management is delicate. Too close and meat cooks unevenly or freezes. Too far and warmth is lost. You mimic the techniques of long-departed hunters, suspending meat above embers, turning slowly, monitoring both flame and frost. Historians still argue whether early trappers favored smoke preservation or simple drying, but practical outcomes mattered more than philosophy. Meal preparation is also a lesson in resourcefulness. Roots, nuts, and foraged berries are combined with small game to create a sustenance-rich blend. Mountain men often improvised recipes, balancing flavor with caloric density. Quirky as it sounds, some added resin or pine sap to meat to extend preservation. You try this cautiously, marveling at the ingenuity born of necessity. Back at your cabin, you arrange the day's catch carefully. Meat hangs near the fire but not too close, while smaller game is packed in snow-lined containers for longer storage. Observation remains key, ice forming on surfaces, drafts, and even the angle of sunlight can affect spoilage and availability. Every decision carries consequence. Night falls and the cabin becomes a warm sanctuary once more. You sit by the fire, watching embers dance and reflecting on the day. Hunting in winter is a lesson in patience, attention, and respect for the land. The mountain men didn't merely endure, they learned, adapted, and thrived, turning harsh conditions into a stage for human ingenuity. As the snow drifts against the cabin walls, you settle into your furs, full but alert, mindful that tomorrow will bring new challenges and new lessons. Survival is a continuous negotiation with the wilderness, and you are learning its language slowly but surely. Tonight you rest, fortified by food, warmth, and the quiet satisfaction of a day well navigated. 12. Nature's tricks and traps. Learn how avalanches, thin ice, and frostbite were constant teachers in this unrelenting classroom. The day begins with a brittle silence, broken only by the faint hiss of wind across distant ridges. You rise, muscles still stiff from yesterday's exertions, and consider the intricate art of water management in freezing conditions. Mountain men depended on reliable hydration as much as warmth and food. Streams are solid ice, wells are frozen, and even snow must be transformed thoughtfully to avoid dehydration or frostbite from handling frozen water. You collect a small pile of ice and snow, noting its texture and layering. Fresh, powdery snow is light but inefficient, while compacted layers yield more water when melted. You chip carefully, using the edge of your knife to break the ice into manageable pieces. Quirky methods abound. Some mountain men carried small sacks of insulating material to melt ice safely, while others used heated stones to gradually turn snow into drinkable water. Historians still argue whether melting snow directly or relying on flowing streams yielded better hydration, but all agree that clever adaptation was essential. Fire management once again plays a crucial role. You arrange a small collection of kindling and embers specifically for water melting purposes, careful not to overheat or ignite nearby firs. The process is deliberate. Balance, observation, and timing dictate whether you can secure enough hydration without compromising warmth. Sparks fly carefully, and tiny curls of smoke rise, promising life in liquid form. You heat the snow slowly, stirring with a clean stick, allowing liquid to collect in a tin can. Each sip is a reward, lukewarm, sustaining, and surprisingly comforting in the relentless cold. Mountain men often flavored water with small bits of resin or pine needles, not for taste alone but to ward off scurvy and maintain health. Quirky but effective, these methods exemplify the subtle interplay of science, observation, and tradition. Meanwhile, you maintain your shelter, checking for moisture buildup from condensation, which could freeze overnight and weaken your structure. Snow piled against walls is cleared methodically, ensuring airflow and structural integrity. Some mountain men even carve small trenches around their cabins to direct melting snow away from the foundation, a practice both practical and ingenious. You follow these principles, feeling the quiet satisfaction of preventative care. Meal preparation integrates hydration seamlessly. You thaw roots and small game using water heated over embers, balancing nutrition and warmth. Mountain men often relied on a combination of foraged plant material, stored meat, and melted snow for cooking, ensuring energy-dense meals that wouldn't exhaust their limited fuel. Historians still argue about the exact caloric strategies used, but evidence shows a clear pattern. Survival required careful management of both water and food resources. As the day progresses, you collect and store additional snow for later use, creating small insulated caches inside the cabin. Each container is labeled subtly with carved notches, a method that ensures continued access even after storms obscure your tracks. Quirky, meticulous, yet effective, the hallmark of survival ingenuity. By late afternoon, the cabin feels both warm and well-stocked. Water melted, food thawed, and furs arranged thoughtfully, you step back to admire the harmony of your efforts. Survival here is not brute force, it is rhythm, strategy, and mindfulness, a dance of observation and response honed by generations of mountain men. Night falls again, snow drifting in soft, rhythmic swirls outside. You wrap yourself in layers of furs, sip a cup of warmed water, and feel a quiet triumph. Today you mastered one more element of the mountains: hydration. The wilderness is relentless, but with careful attention, ingenuity, and patience it can be navigated. Tonight you rest, warmed, nourished, and hydrated, prepared for the challenges tomorrow will inevitably bring. 13. Legends frozen in time meet the real figures, Bridger, Glass, and others, whose shelters and scars became mountain folklore. Dawn breaks slowly, painting the snow in muted shades of gray and silver. Today your attention shifts to navigation and orientation, the skills that keep you from wandering blindly through the mountains trapped in white oblivion. Maps were scarce, compasses unreliable in extreme cold, and landmarks often buried under layers of snow. Mountain men developed an intuitive understanding of terrain, reading ridges, tree lines, and shadows as guides. You step outside, snowshoes crunching over frost-hardened ground, scanning the horizon. Small details, a bend in a creek, a lone pine, a particular ridge become reference points. Quirky methods were sometimes employed, stacking rocks or carving notches into trees to mark routes, subtle enough not to confuse others or predators. Historians still debate how much of navigation was memorized versus physically marked, but clearly both methods played a role. Wind direction is also a crucial factor. Snow drifts, the angle of ice on trees, and even the way frost forms on rocks indicate prevailing currents. Mountain men learn to read these cues instinctively, understanding that orientation is not just a matter of distance but also safety. You adjust your course, keeping the cabin as a reference while exploring further afield for supplies, ensuring you do not lose your bearings. Travel demands awareness of terrain hazards. Thin ice, hidden crevasses, and avalanche-prone slopes require careful observation and deliberate packing. You test each step, listening for subtle cracks or differences in snow density. Quirky as it might seem, some mountain men carried small rods to probe snow depth ahead, a simple yet effective technique. Survival depends not only on courage but on measured attention to risk. You make brief stops to check traps and refresh food caches, moving deliberately to preserve energy. Mountain men often traveled light, carrying only essentials while leaving caches behind for longer journeys. Each item has a specific purpose: fire-starting materials, food, tools, and emergency equipment. Historians still argue about the optimal balance between weight and preparedness, but experience shows that careful planning allows both mobility and safety. Observing the sky provides additional orientation. The sun, when visible, offers subtle hints of direction and time. Cloud patterns indicate approaching weather shifts. Quirky techniques included using shadows cast by sticks to determine compass points when the sun was low. You follow these practices, feeling an intimate connection to the land and its rhythms. By mid-afternoon, you reach a vantage point overlooking frozen valleys and distant peaks. You pause, sled resting beside you, observing the interplay of light and shadow across the snow. Navigation here is both science and art, a delicate combination of observation, memory, and experience. Mountain men developed these skills out of necessity, refining them over years of trial and error. Returning to your cabin before evening, you reinforce small trail markers and inspect snowdrifts for hazards. Your understanding of the terrain allows you to move efficiently while minimizing risk. Inside, you arrange furs and supplies, the cabin glowing faintly from the embers of a carefully managed fire. The day's efforts underscore that survival isn't just about tools, food, or shelter. It's about knowledge, attention, and respect for the mountain environment. As night falls, snow swirls gently against the cabin walls. You settle into furs, firelight dancing across your shelter, reflecting on the quiet victories of the day. Understanding the landscape, interpreting its subtle signals, and navigating safely through its frozen expanse. Tonight, orientation and awareness have become another layer of your armor, another triumph in the delicate art of mountain survival. Morning arrives softly, the sun low and silver over frost-covered ridges. Today, your attention turns to defense and awareness, the subtle strategies mountain men use to protect themselves from both wildlife and environmental hazards. In a world where blizzards, predators, and treacherous terrain intersect, vigilance was as vital as warmth, food, or shelter. You begin by inspecting the cabin perimeter, noting weak points where drifting snow could collapse walls or where hidden ice could form dangerous patches. Quirky techniques included embedding sharpened stakes around the cabin or camouflaging barriers with branches to deter both animals and unwelcome visitors. Historians still debate whether mountain men saw such defenses as primarily practical or psychological, but the results were unmistakable. Safety increased. Your traps are checked next. Tracks of rabbits and squirrels indicate recent movement. Some snares have caught small game while others need subtle adjustment. Mountain men learn to read the terrain as an extension of themselves, understanding that every footprint or disturbed branch is information. Quirky tricks like scattering pine needles to detect intruders or animals reveal the ingenuity born from constant observation. Weather remains an ever-present threat. Even a calm morning can shift to a blizzard in hours. You assess snow conditions, noting potential avalanche zones and wind-exposed slopes. Mountain men often used ridgelines and tree cover as natural protection, and some even built snow walls in strategic locations to shield temporary camps. Historians still argue whether proactive construction or reactive sheltering was more common, but both strategies were employed with skill and care. Your fire is maintained meticulously. Smoke is directed to minimize visibility outside, preserving both warmth and discretion. Mountain men often use small controlled flames rather than large fires, balancing comfort with concealment. Quirky as it seems, some would create decoy smoke signals to mislead curious animals or human passers-by. You adjust embers, adding kindling sparingly to maintain warmth without drawing unnecessary attention. You spend part of the day reinforcing your sleeping area, layering furs with additional padding and ensuring ventilation prevents frost accumulation. Observation remains key. Every surface is examined for moisture, drafts, or structural weakness. A slight miscalculation could compromise sleep, warmth, and ultimately survival. Mountain men treated such routines as sacred, understanding that small oversights can cascade into life-threatening consequences. By afternoon, you perform a mental audit of your surroundings, trails, markers, caches, and potential hazards. Awareness becomes a form of mastery, a quiet assertion of control over a harsh, indifferent environment, quirky as it may sound. Some mountain men even used sound cues, listening for distant animal calls or shifting snow to detect hidden threats or locate resources. You pause, closing your eyes, absorbing the subtle symphony of winter life and feel both humbled and empowered. Night falls and the wind sweeps across frozen ridges, rattling your cabin and drifts. Inside, the fire casts long shadows, furs layered around you, provisions neatly arranged. Defense and awareness have become part of your daily rhythm, embedded into every motion and decision. Mountain men knew that survival is not static. It requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and respect for the forces surrounding you. As you settle into furs, warmth, and embers, you feel a quiet pride and mastery over this frozen wilderness. Awareness, defense, and preparation form a protective shell as essential as logs, snow, or fire. Tonight, the mountains remain vast and indifferent, but within your cabin, you are steady, observant, and secure, ready for whatever the world outside may bring. Peaks a muted silver glow filtering into your cabin. Today, your focus is on endurance and reflection, the quiet wisdom mountain men gained through repeated exposure to winter's extremes. You stretch beneath layers of furs, muscles sore yet accustomed to the rhythm of work, rest, and observation. Survival is as much mental as it is physical, and endurance is built one deliberate action at a time. You step outside, the cold biting sharply at exposed skin. The wind has settled into a low moan and the landscape glistens under frost-laden trees and ice-encrusted ridges. Endurance is not about heroic feats but careful, persistent attention, checking traps, maintaining fire, reinforcing shelters, and observing weather changes. Quirky as it may seem, some mountain men practiced mental exercises, counting snowflakes, reciting lines of poetry, or inventing small rituals to stave off cabin fever and maintain focus. Historians still debate whether these practices were widespread or anecdotal, but the evidence of mental fortitude is undeniable. You tend the fire, adjusting embers and kindling to maintain consistent warmth. Food is modest yet sustaining. A combination of dried meat, roots, and nuts carefully rationed to provide energy without waste. Mountain men understood the delicate balance between exertion and caloric intake, often calculating journeys, hunting times, and rest periods to optimize survival. Quirky, improvisational solutions like warming stones to slowly cook frozen meat illustrate the ingenuity required in such a merciless environment. You check your cabins, temporary shelters, and caches one last time for the day. Snow shifts subtly around corners and walls, and even a minor misalignment could allow drafts or collapses. Observation is constant, and endurance depends on the accumulation of small, careful actions. Historians still argue whether the iconic mountain man lifestyle relied more on luck, skill, or sheer determination, but clearly all three intertwined in practice. Meal preparation becomes a meditation, a rhythm of cutting, heating, and consuming with deliberate care. Each sip of thawed water, each bite of dried venison reminds you that survival is iterative. Small, repeated successes accumulate into days of life and nights of safety. Quirky innovations like layering furs beneath cooking stones or rotating embers show that even the simplest elements of daily life were refined through trial, error, and experience. As the afternoon wanes, you reflect on the ingenuity embedded in every task. Snow shelters, cabins, furs, fire, water, food, and navigation are all interconnected. Mountain men survived not because they conquered nature, but because they adapted continuously, learning to observe, improvise, and respect the forces around them. Each day is a lesson in patience, focus, and subtle mastery. Night settles softly, and you curl into your furs, firelight flickering across logs and snow-frosted windows. The wind outside hums a lullaby, less threatening now because you have endured, adapted, and prepared. You breathe deeply, feeling warmth, safety, and quiet pride in your resilience. The mountains are vast, cold, and indifferent, yet you have learned to navigate their rhythm, turning hardship into a subtle, lived wisdom. The world outside your cabin is changing, slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. You wake to the sound of dripping, faint, rhythmic, persistent. The icicles that clung to your eaves for months are melting, and with every drop, the mountain stirs a little closer to life. The air smells different now, damp wood, thawing earth, the faint metallic hint of running water somewhere deep beneath the snowpack. You step outside, boots sinking into the softening crust. The snow that once stood waist-deep has begun to rot from below, collapsing into patches of slush that threaten to swallow your footing. The forest is hushed but not silent. There's the occasional snap of ice falling from branches, the creak of trunks warming under sunlight, and the distant call of a crow, the first you've heard in weeks. It's spring, though the mountains are reluctant to admit it. And for you, that means change. It means risk. The thaw is beautiful, yes, but it's also treacherous. The same slopes that protected you in winter can now betray you with avalanches or landslides. Rivers that once froze solid now surge with meltwater, unpredictable and hungry. You make your way to the creek, or where you remember it being. What you find instead is a roaring torrent of gray-green water frothing with ice and debris. The bridge of logs you built months ago has vanished, likely swept downstream. Mountain men learned quickly that spring could be more dangerous than any blizzard. Historians still argue whether more trappers died from cold or from meltwater floods, but most agree that the thaw was when vigilance mattered most. You kneel by the edge, filling your canteen. The water tastes sharp and alive, but it carries the chill of melting snow, numbing your fingers as you drink. You watch a chunk of ice spin past, breaking apart in the current, and feel a strange kinship with it, something enduring yet always in motion. Back at your cabin, you start rearranging. Winter stores are low now. The furs that once lined the walls feel heavy, damp with the scent of melting frost. You hang them higher, closer to the smoke hole, letting the fire's warmth dry them slowly. Your tools, the axe, the traps, the rifle, are cleaned and checked, ready for the next phase of survival, the transition from enduring winter to living again in the open world. Mountain men called this period the waking months, not just because the earth stirred, but because they had to too. Months of near hibernation, of conserving every calorie, gave way to action. Traps were reset, caches uncovered, and trails reopened. Quirky as it sounds. Some men swore they could hear the mountains sigh, as if the whole land exhaled the breath it had held through the long dark. You decide to check your traps, heading north along the ridge. The air feels lighter, but the terrain is treacherous. Beneath every step lies hidden water streams forming under the snow, carving secret channels. More than once your boot plunges through to icy liquid, soaking wool socks that sting and freeze almost instantly. You curse softly, not from anger but out of respect. The mountain, as always, demands humility. By midday, clouds gather, not winter's thick gray sheets but softer, higher ones, diffusing the light. You find one of your old traps half buried under melting snow and reset it with careful fingers. The bait is simple, the mechanism efficient. Hunger sharpens your focus and habit steadies your hands. Historians still debate how much of the mountain men's knowledge was instinct versus learned skill, but standing here you realize it hardly matters. Out here, instinct is the lesson. As you work, a sound stops you, a distant rumble. It's not thunder, it's deeper, more resonant. You look up toward the slope and your heart quickens. Snow, not much but enough. An avalanche, small yet sudden, shears off from a distant cornice and slides into the valley below. It's mesmerizing in its power, a reminder that even as the world softens, danger never really melts away. You take it as a warning, finishing your work and retreating carefully to safer ground. Along the way you spot the tracks of something large, maybe an elk, maybe a bear newly awake from its den. The prints are wide, deliberate, heading downhill. You follow them at a distance, more out of curiosity than intent. Bears are hungry this time of year, and a careless approach could mean trouble. By dusk you return to your cabin. The light outside is golden now, filtered through clouds that glow like tarnished brass. Steam rises from the ground where sun and snow meet, creating wisps that dance between the trees. You build a small fire outside and cook the last of your dried meat, adding a few shoots of early green you found near the stream. The taste is sharp and earthy, a promise of variety after months of sameness. As you eat, you think about the first trappers who braved these mountains centuries ago, armed with nothing but flintlocks, courage, and stubbornness. Historians still argue whether their endurance came from training, luck, or sheer will, but you suspect it was something quieter, a kind of surrender. They didn't fight the mountain, they listened to it. And in listening, they survived. The stars come out, faint at first, then bolder. The night air smells of wet earth and pine resin. You sit by the fire, feeling both restless and content. The hardest part of the year is over, but the most unpredictable one has just begun. The mountain has awakened, and so have you. Inside, you bank the coals, stretch beneath your furs, and close your eyes. The sound of dripping water continues outside, steady, rhythmic, eternal. It's not a warning anymore, it's a lullaby. A slow reminder that every season, no matter how harsh, gives way to the next. The days grow longer now. Each morning arrives earlier, light spilling into your cabin before you're fully awake. The snow retreats in patches, revealing dark, damp soil and tangles of roots that look like veins in the earth. You breathe in the air and it smells alive again, muddy, sharp, faintly sweet from thawing pine sap. It's the scent of movement, and it stirs something restless in you. Your supplies are thin and your solitude is beginning to hum in your bones. It's time. The spring rendezvous, that gathering of traders, trappers, and wanderers, will soon unfold somewhere down the valley. The exact location changes each year, whispered through the mountains like rumor, but you always find it. You always feel it. The world begins to move in that direction, trails appear, smoke signals rise faintly on distant ridges, and the silence you've known for months begins to carry echoes again. You pack deliberately. A bundle of furs, a pouch of dried meat, a tin cup, the old flintlock, and the small trinkets you've collected through winter, bones carved into charms, a polished stone, a feather caught in a trap line. Quirky maybe, but such things were as valuable as gold at the rendezvous. Historians still debate how much trade among mountain men was about need versus ritual. Was it commerce or communion? Perhaps both. The morning you leave, frost still glazes the grass, but the sun climbs warm and sure. Your first steps away from the cabin feel strange, almost sacred. You glance back once, the roof sagging under old snow, smoke rising lazily through the vent, the door half-shadowed, and you feel a flicker of affection. That place saved you, but it also taught you what solitude costs. The trail down valley is treacherous. Melting snow turns paths into slick rivers of mud, and the streams you once crossed easily are now swollen, roaring with snowmelt. You test one crossing with a branch, watching the water tear at the wood like teeth. Then you strip to your waist, sling your gear high, and wade in. The cold hits like a hammer. You move carefully, feeling the current fight you, trying to pull you sideways. Your breath comes in gasps, but the far bank is close. When you reach it trembling, you feel alive in a way that winter never allowed. As you travel, the forest shifts. The trees grow denser, buds swelling on their branches, birds returning with sharp, sudden bursts of song. You catch sight of a fox darting through the underbrush, its fur patchy from winter but its movements quick and deliberate. A reminder that every living thing here has survived something. By midday you find the old trail markers, cuts in the bark of pines, symbols left by trappers. You smile when you see them. They mean you're on the right path, and more than that, they mean you're not alone in this vastness. Quirky as it sounds, some men left jokes etched into the trees, crude sketches, initials, or cryptic words. You find one still alive, March 12. It makes you laugh softly into the empty forest. The first campfire smoke you see isn't yours. It curls upward from a bend in the valley, faint but sure. Your heart beats faster. It's been months since you heard another human voice. You follow the scent of wood smoke and soon you find them, 3 trappers, bearded, weathered, dressed in patchwork buckskins. They greet you not with surprise, but with the easy nod of men who understand solitude. There's talk, laughter, and a shared meal. One passes you a tin cup of coffee, black, strong, and miraculous after months of boiled pine bark. You savor it like medicine. Conversation drifts easily between you, tales of winter hardships, near misses, and the strange humor that comes with survival. Historians still argue how accurate these rendezvous accounts are, whether they were rowdy and lawless or gentle and communal, but sitting here you sense they were both. Wild joy balanced by quiet respect. You travel together for 2 days following the valley's descent. More trappers join as the trail widens, men emerging from forest and ridge, from riverbank and ravine, drawn by the same promise of trade and human warmth. By the 3rd day, the air itself feels different, filled with the faint clang of metal, the smell of smoke, and the laughter of men echoing off canyon walls. And then you see it, the rendezvous. A field stretched wide between river and mountain, dotted with tents and lean-tos. Horses graze near the edge while smoke rises from dozens of fires. Traders in fringed coats move among the crowd, their packs laden with cloth, powder, salt, and goods from distant cities. The noise is astonishing, laughter, argument, music, all tangled together in a wild harmony. You step into it like a dreamer walking into memory. Men slap your shoulder, shout greetings, ask after your traps and furs. A trader eyes your bundle, weighing the pelts with quick, practiced hands. The negotiations are quiet but firm, a pound of beaver for 2 pounds of coffee, a fox pelt for a new knife. The exchange is efficient, but there's a ritual beneath it, mutual recognition, respect born from endurance. You spend the evening among them, seated near the central fire. Someone plays a fiddle, another sings an old tune about home, a place that feels impossibly far away now. You close your eyes and listen, the music mingling with crackling logs and murmured voices. The warmth seeps into you deeper than any fire you've built alone. Later, as the stars rise, the talk shifts to stories. Wild, half-true tales about bears as tall as cabins, blizzards survived with nothing but grit, spirits seen in the snow. You tell one yourself about a night when you thought the wind was whispering your name. The others nod, amused but not disbelieving. Out here, nobody questions the strangeness of the mountains. When the fire burns low, you wander to the edge of camp. The night is vast again, but not empty. The sound of laughter fades into the rustle of trees, and you feel the pull of 2 worlds, the quiet solitude of your cabin and this noisy, fleeting civilization. Historians still argue what drew mountain men back after these gatherings. The comforts of trade, the pull of society, or simply the rhythm of life they couldn't escape to survive alone, then return briefly to remember they were human. You suspect it's all of it. You watch the fires flicker and think of the mountains waiting beyond the dark horizon. Tomorrow you'll trade more, perhaps find new maps or rumors of fresh territory. But tonight you let the warmth and laughter soak into you. You sit by the last embers, listening to the mountains breathe, and realize that even in a crowd, the wilderness is never far. It's inside you now, steady, cold, and eternal. The morning is quiet, almost shockingly so after the hum of the rendezvous. You step away from the last flickers of smoke rising from the tents and lean lightly on your pack, feeling its weight, the contents shifted from weeks of careful preparation. Each bundle of furs and dried meat is a reminder of effort, skill, and luck, tucked tightly beneath the straps of your worn leather harness. The trail ahead is familiar in form but altered by thaw, sun, and recent storms. Snow has melted unevenly across the valley, leaving patches of slush, mud, and hidden pools of ice. You test each step with your walking stick, boots sliding slightly on hidden slicks, your fingers brushing damp moss and thorned brush as you navigate carefully. Each movement feels deliberate, each breath crisp and cold, mingled with the earthy aroma of wet soil and pine sap. The mountains are awake now, alive with the subtle sounds of flowing water, rustling underbrush, and the occasional cry of returning wildlife. You pause at a bend where a small stream, once frozen solid, has swelled into a rushing ribbon of water. The current is deceptive, hiding rocks and loose soil beneath a thin layer of foam. You take a deep breath and cross slowly, boots clinking against stones and water splashing in quiet arcs. The cold bites at your calves, a sharp reminder that the wilderness respects every step. Quirky though it seems, some mountain men carried small, polished stones to test ice and water depth, a simple ritual of safety. Historians still argue whether such methods were universally practiced or anecdotal, but in your hands they feel essential. The trail winds upward, gradually narrowing as the valley sides steepen. You notice new growth peeking through thawed soil, delicate green shoots, clusters of early flowers, and the faint sparkle of dew-laden cobwebs. The landscape seems almost timid, as though nature itself is stretching awake. Yet there is danger hidden in this softness. Meltwater has undermined small ledges, and mudslides could shift without warning. You move deliberately, testing the ground with each step, balancing momentum with caution. Along the trail you find traces of other travelers. A crudely carved notch in a tree marking a trap line, footprints partially washed by spring runoff, and the faint tang of smoke from a distant fire. It's comforting to know you are not entirely alone, yet the mountains remain vast and indifferent. Every sign is a subtle reminder: observe, interpret, respect. You step lightly, listening for the faint snap of twigs or rustle of leaves, subtle alerts to both prey and predator. Midday sun filters through a thinning canopy, warming your shoulders as you rest briefly on a fallen log. You unwrap a small portion of dried meat, savoring its chewy texture and salty tang. Even the simplest nourishment feels like celebration after months of strict rationing. Mountain men often paired food with ritual, chewing slowly, measuring portions, and pausing to observe surroundings. Quirky perhaps, but such attentiveness sustained both body and mind. Historians still argue whether these habits were practical, superstitious, or a little of both, but sitting here, you feel their utility. You resume your trek, following the faint trail that leads deeper into the mountains. The path rises steadily, curving around ridges and through pockets of denser forest. Water trickles from thawing snow, forming temporary rivulets that trick you with their hidden depth. You balance carefully, hands brushing bark and moss, feeling the rough texture, the occasional slickness of frozen leaves. Awareness is constant, a meditation in motion. As afternoon fades, you encounter a small group of deer grazing near a thawed meadow. Their coats are sleek, eyes bright and alert, ears swiveling at every rustle. You freeze instinctively, observing their behavior, nodding wind direction and stance. Mountain men learn to read wildlife not just for hunting, but as environmental indicators. Shifts in behavior, movement patterns, and location could signal changes in weather, predators, or terrain stability. Quirky as it may sound, some trappers carried notebooks or made mental sketches of animal behavior for future reference. Historians still debate how formalized such observations were, but their practicality is clear. Evening approaches as you crest a ridge, the valley below stretched out like a patchwork quilt of melting snow, brown soil, and distant rivulets. The wind is cooler now, brushing over exposed skin, carrying the faint tang of damp earth and pine resin. You scout a small clearing for shelter, remembering lessons learned through winter. Windbreaks, proximity to water, and insulation are critical. You gather branches, dry leaves, and patches of moss, building a modest windbreak to protect you from nightfall chill. As the sun dips, painting the mountains in muted gold and gray, you start a small fire. The smell of burning wood mingles with the damp air, comforting and grounding. You remove furs from your pack, layering them carefully on the ground, adjusting for uneven terrain. The ritual is familiar. Light the embers, tend the fire, prepare the sleeping area, and reflect on the day's passage. By nightfall, the valley is quiet except for the occasional distant call of wildlife and the soft crackle of embers. You sit near the fire, sipping a small portion of water and nibbling the remaining dried meat. The trek back has been long, but each step has reinforced a sense of self, rhythm, and understanding of this rugged landscape. The mountains, softened by thaw, remain challenging, yet the knowledge you've accumulated through winter and spring fortifies your confidence. Stars begin to pierce the deepening sky, mirrored faintly in patches of water reflecting the dim moonlight. You lie back on your layered furs, firelight dancing across logs and leaves, and feel the quiet satisfaction of endurance. The journey homeward is underway, but the lessons of winter and rendezvous carry with you, steady and enduring.